I want to welcome everybody to the second panel we have for our session today. It's the Extended Day Ahead Market Panel. As we were preparing for the meeting out here, the spring meeting in California, I was talking to different people about what would be a good topic for us to try to address, and I kept hearing over and over again, we ought to focus on the Extended Day Ahead market as we sit here now today on the eve of the rollout of that. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel. We're going to go through a discussion about it, and we're going to open it up for questions after we get through our initial comments. So I'll start off by introducing the folks I've got up here, and I've got a great variety of perspectives on this topic, which is something we always like to have at the WIRES meetings. So right next to me, I have Vijay Singh. He's the current Senior Organized Markets Analyst at PacificCorp, where he leads the company's participation in CAISO's policy initiatives and focuses on market design and analysis. So they're going to be the first ones entering into this rollout, so we're going to be really interested to hear their perspective. Next to Vijay is an old friend, Becky Robinson. She's the Director of Market Policy and Development at CAISO, one of the architects of the market we're going to be talking about. And she's a former colleague from FERC, so always great to have somebody who I worked with at an agency I loved working at up on one of our panels. And then we also have Kathleen Stacks here, and she's the Executive Director at Western Freedom. It's a group that works to enable the delivery of low-cost electricity to the West through an efficient and integrated grid. So really anxious to hear what they have to say. Before we start, though, I want to mention I am wearing my WIRES socks, by the way, so I'm flying the WIRES flag here, and I saw quite a few people wearing them, so I'm pleased to see that people are taking advantage of that. So with that total aside, we'll go ahead now. And I thought it would be helpful, frankly, to start with you, Becky, and have you give us a little bit of an overview of the EDAM and talk a little bit about what it is and provide some insight into it for some of us, myself somewhat included, who aren't as familiar with it as maybe others.
Of course. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. And thanks for the warm introduction, Larry. And it's great to get to see you again and catch up with some former FERC colleagues in the room as well. So EDAM, the Extended Day Ahead Market. So what is it? I know a lot of you are based on the East, and for those of you in the West, forgive me the overview. But so you may know that today the California ISO, we operate the real-time markets throughout the West, and we call that the energy imbalance market, the Western energy imbalance market. And that is our real-time market, our 15-minute market and 5-minute market, and that has grown over time to be 22 balancing areas across the West, and we're really proud of that achievement and that growth of markets across the West in that real-time time frame. Something that started in 2014 with PacificCorp being the first first entity to join CAISO's real-time market outside of the traditional CAISO footprint, and just grew gradually over time as more people saw the value in it. And so with EDAM, this is the first time then that an entity outside of the CAISO traditional footprint will be participating in the day-ahead market. And we know there's a lot of additional value to be gained from that because there's a lot of more volume and decisions that happen in the day-ahead time frame compared to the real-time time frame. When in real time, you're dispatching sort of on the margin, if you will, with imbalance energy. But in day ahead, you get to make a lot more decisions about what units to commit, how to think about the transmission grid of the whole market footprint that you're optimizing over. And so a lot more value to be had there in terms of optimizing that market dispatch over a bigger geography. And so along with EDAM, we're also introducing a new day-ahead reserve product at the same time. So that's our new imbalance reserve product. It's meant to cover uncertainty between the day-ahead and real-time market time frame. It is distinct from ancillary services and things like that, which brings me to my next point, which is what is EDAM not? So it's not like joining the ISO or like joining an RTO. It's similar in the sense that you are going to be participating in the day-ahead market, but there are sort of key features of what we think of typical ISO, RTO market design that are not necessarily part of this step of joining EDAM. And so it's not, coming under a single transmission service provider. The EDAM entities will maintain their own open access transmission tariffs. It's not, there's no common resource adequacy framework necessarily for EDAM, like a capacity market in the eastern markets, or even like MISO or SPP's construct, where they have a common resource adequacy standard. But we do have a resource sufficiency evaluation, which is a way of making sure, to use the picnic analogy, everyone's got to bring enough food to the picnic for themselves to eat, but once you're at the picnic, you can share with your friends. But everyone's got to bring something, and enough to cover their own needs. So, but that's a operational time frame check on resource efficiency rather than a forward planning check or exercise. So again, forward planning remains with the EDAM entities to handle on their own. And we may talk more about that later, though. And then finally, it's not a consolidated balancing area. So no common co-optimization of ancillary services across the EDAM footprint. But again, that's, and so entities retain their reliability authority. In saying what it is and what it isn't, I've been recently reminded that, MISO, SPP, started out in a similar fashion, right, where they did not consolidate balancing areas. They sort of took a very stepwise approach in terms of incremental steps where people saw the value, got comfortable with those steps, and then, further down the road, people were able to see value in additional steps. So the step we're at right now is having, again, entities outside of California join the day-ahead market, and we're really excited about that. It goes live May 1, so that's tomorrow, I think. So we're actually running the day-ahead market for tomorrow today, if that makes sense. And so I think VJ is going to be heading back this afternoon to make sure that everything's gone well with that on the PAC side.
This is a real sign of confidence that you guys are sitting here today with that coming out tomorrow. So I think that's a really great sign. Before I start moving on, though, I wanted to ask about one additional thing, which is, as I understand it, it's kind of a staged or staggered rollout process associated with it. So if you could talk a little bit about that, how you see it playing out, who the next participants might be down the road, what the timeline is on it, and is that following a pattern that happened with the real-time market? I'm just curious
Yes.
about all of that.
Yes, no, thank you. Thanks for that question. So, right, PacificCorp is the first entity to join on May 1. But we have several other folks lined up to join in future steps, like Larry was just saying. So in the fall of this year, Portland General Electric is planning to join, and they're actually already doing some market simulation work with our team to kind of start that data exchange and getting everything, just get the plumbing, so to speak, in place and make sure it's working and starting those steps. So they're going to be joining, I think, October, November this year, I forget which month it is. And then next year in 2027, we have several entities lined up to join in the fall. And so several California entities that have not been part of the CAISO historically. And those are, the balancing area of Northern California, Bank, LA Department of Water and Power, LADWP, Turlock Irrigation District, and then in addition to those California entities, we've got Public Service of New Mexico also joining in 2027, which is really exciting. There's a lot of great wind resources in New Mexico. And then the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada just approved NV Energy's application to join EDAM. So we're really excited to continue working with them, figure out when makes sense from their perspective. And then we've also got some other entities that have have expressed a leaning towards EDAM, nothing formal yet in terms of implementation agreement, but Idaho Power and I'm forgetting someone, or maybe that was NV who was on that list as well.
Imperial Irrigation?
Oh yeah, Imperial Irrigation District, they're joining in 2028 as well, I think. And I should say too, we've also got next week a couple of new entities joining EIM, so just the real-time market with BHE Montana and Black Hills Energy. So that's something that's continuing to grow even now as well, as people see the value there. So, and I think, Larry, to your point, this gradual sort of adoption and people being able to join when they're ready, that does mirror the pattern that we saw for the energy imbalance market in terms of it being a voluntary opportunity for people to go, to come when it's right for them. And I think we hope to continue that with EDAM.
Well, great, thanks. That was a very enlightening and thorough overview of it, and I appreciate that. EJ, all right, PacificCorp, up first. Can you talk a little bit about, from a utility perspective, what do you expect in terms of being a first entrant into this market, and a little bit about what some of the advantages are of being in a market like this?
Yeah, sure. And first off, thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invite. It's great to be here with the Wires Group. So yeah, first a little bit about PacificCorp. We're a investor-owned utility, vertically integrated with about 2 million power customers spread out across California, Oregon, Washington, Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. We also sell transmission service to load-serving entities across the West. And then we do operate 2 balancing areas, one on the west side in California, Oregon, and Washington, and one on the east side in Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. So we, like Becky said, we decided to join the energy imbalance market in 2014. We're the first participant to do so. And since then, we've just seen tremendous benefits to our customers through lower power production costs. And for those of you coming from the eastern markets, I'm sure you're all thinking like, yeah, this is super obvious. Organized electricity markets, they're good for customers. We're getting there in the West. It's just taking a little bit longer and we're doing things a little bit differently, but we are getting there. And so it was pretty clear early on in the energy imbalance market that there were a whole lot of other benefits out there, economic benefits for us by doing a day-ahead market and expanding the energy imbalance market. And so we again partnered with the CAISO and other market participants across the West to design the extended day-ahead market, and PacificCorp decided to join in 2024. And I think we are just expecting a lot of the same kind of economic benefits that the EIM is providing, really lowering those power production costs for our consumers and transferring energy across a larger footprint using a diverse set of resources and really maximizing the transmission that's available across the West to move energy across the West. We've also seen in the energy imbalance market not only economic benefits, but reliability benefits. We had a big winter storm last year in the Pacific Northwest that knocked out a few resources and some transmission and really put the Northwest in a supply crunch. And the energy imbalance market was instrumental in being able to help the Northwest kind of get through that tough period by moving power from the desert Southwest and California up to the Northwest. So, we do see the economic benefits and the reliability benefits, and we really think the EDAM is going to build on those benefits. And we do also know, as Becky was talking about, kind of this incremental growth. So like we saw with the EIM, as more participants join the EDAM, our benefits kind of will grow kind of in relation to that growth of the market footprint. So for the past 2 years, we've been really focused on implementing this market. We've been working closely with the CAISO to turn the market design into technology and processes. And certainly I've learned over the past 2 years that these big market changes are one big IT project, right? Because every single piece of software that we use to participate in the real-time market needs to be updated and improved for our participation in the day-ahead market. It's also been a lot of training for PacificCorp staff. There's been changes kind of across the company, but as you can imagine, for our energy traders, we're moving from a world where today most transactions in the day-ahead time frame are happening just between two entities at specified trading hubs, whereas that will still be around tomorrow, but most of our energy trading will be happening in the EDAM come tomorrow. So there's lots of changes there, and so yeah, it's been 2 years. Some of it's gone by really fast, some of it's gone by really slowly, but we are here, and as Becky said, today the market's kind of opened up and producing market results for tomorrow. So we will be seeing in a few hours kind of the first results from the EDAM, and I think everything has gone pretty smoothly, but not perfect, of course. Like none of these big market changes ever go 100% according to plan, but we've built processes with the CAISO to kind of get through any of these initial hiccups. And then, market design is always changing and improving. So I'm sure over the next couple of years, we'll be finding increased efficiencies and fixing any of the small bugs that we may see early on at the start of the EDAM.
Well, great. Kathleen, let me turn to you. You come at this with a different perspective through Western Freedom. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the differences coming from the West that there are from those who may be in the Midwest or Eastern regions, and then also touch a little bit on some of the governance issues that are associated with the rollout and development of this market.
Thanks, Larry, and thanks. This is really loud. Also, I'm going to try to not fall apart here on the stage. Fighting a cold, I got allergies. I'm like a hot mess. I'm going to start with Western Freedom because I have had a handful of conversations with folks. It is an egregiously named organization on purpose. And what we are really focused on is the politics of actually moving the West along towards more regionalization. And that means that we have to work across the entire Western region, and that includes California and Montana. And so in Montana, they really like Western Freedom. And so that has made some of those conversations a little bit easier, believe it or not. And so so just to sort of get that one out of the way. So we focus on kind of the politics, which means we're focusing on the governance side of things. So one of the things that has made this progress in the West slow is that the CAISO, as the primary market operator in the West, has a board that's appointed by the California governor and confirmed by the Senate, which means that any of these additional services that require utilities and market participants to give up control makes it real hard. They don't want to give up control to an entity that has a politically appointed board. And it could be any state, but it happens to be California, which makes those feelings that much stronger. And so we have been, so this is really sort of it's been kind of the albatross around the neck of the West for Western market development. And so in the last few years, we've started to have conversations about, all right, we can't, the California legislature has tried and failed to pass a bill to change the governance of the CAISO. So we need to come up with a different idea. And so the West-wide Governance Pathways Initiative was born in summer of 2023 in response to a letter from regulators in Washington, Oregon, California, New Mexico, and Arizona. And the effort has been to develop a structure of governance to provide independent governance over the markets that the CAISO operates. So we're doing this in a sort of funky and inefficient and particularly challenging way. But I think one of the things that it has really done is it's given us an opportunity to bring a lot of voices together that may not always find themselves on the same side of a conversation. And it has also given us an opportunity to look at market constructs in other parts of the country and say, we really like that piece. We are not going to have a capacity market, just throw that out there. No capacity markets in the West. So that's one of the big differences. And And we're really trying to build on the success that we've seen from the EIM and now EDAM, and be able to say, all right, we've built a lot of trust around these markets. We've seen a lot of benefits delivered. Let's build a new organization that can have the governance over those markets, contract back with the CAISO for the operations of all the markets, and then this entity will be able to continue to develop and offer additional services as the West wants them. So I know this is a room full of folks who are interested in transmission, which is not what we're talking about yet, but the idea is that with this new independently governed entity, we can actually start moving the ball on some of those much bigger conversations because we've gotten some of the politics out of the way. I mean, there's a million things I could keep going into, but maybe I'll wait.
Well, one of the things I wanted to follow up on is the Pathways Initiative. If you could talk a little bit about what that is and how is that going to help deal with some of the challenges you were just talking through.
Yeah, so the Pathways Initiative was really the umbrella for the development of this idea to have a separate and independently governed organization, which we have now incorporated. It's called the Regional Organization for Western Energy, or the ROW. I really wanted to have a competition to name it, but that didn't go anywhere. Maybe we'll have a competition for the mascot, but excuse me. So the idea is, and we're in the process now of developing all of the various processes and infrastructure that are necessary to actually provide independent governance over markets that belong to someone else. It's a really kind of interesting challenge because we're having to work very closely with the CAISO and yet at the same time keep an arm's length because we need to be doing this independently. So we've developed a recommendation for a really robust stakeholder process that is built primarily on the CAISO process, but takes some of the processes and aspects of SPP's stakeholder process. So getting a little bit more of the stakeholder-driven aspect of that process integrated into a new process for the ROW. That's really going to be the key part of the governance that the ROW offers, because it's that stakeholder process that is going to be how we change the market rules in the future, how we adopt additional market services and transmission services down the road. Another thing that we've really kind of run into and have had to address is this fierce independence of each Western state. And this is, everybody says, well, we have to be able to do our own thing. And I don't want, in Montana, let's say, we don't want California to export their energy policies to us. And I'm like, guess what? California feels the same way. We have this in common. And so making sure that we've set up infrastructure that gives these states confidence that the market is not going to force somebody else's energy policies on them. And so, creating some mechanisms for checking in with states and federal power agencies and some local authorities as we're evaluating changes to the market to make sure that they've got input and can identify any potential impacts at the get-go that we can then address through the stakeholder process and make sure that we're accommodating those potential concerns. We also have we're adopting a lot of the market oversight constructs that the CAISO has today. We're creating a whole new consumer advocate organization so that the state consumer advocate offices can coordinate and engage more directly. Because I think Andy was mentioning on the previous panel, so many of these offices, whether it's the commissions or the consumer advocates, they're so under-resourced. That trying to make sure that we've got some infrastructure to help accommodate and help them figure out how to engage in a meaningful way. So it's been we spent 18 months developing a recommendation, and then we had to get a bill passed in California last year to actually enable the CAISO to transfer the authority to a separate entity and enable the California IOUs to participate. in these independently governed markets. So that took an entire
Which
year.
did get passed.
It did.
Which
It did.
was really notable.
Yes, we had a coalition of over 75. It was the best NASCAR letter you guys have ever seen. It included everything from Google and the Sierra Nevada Brewing Company to IBEW and all of the utilities and all the environmental organizations. We had the Sierra Club on there. It was kind of an unholy alliance, really. But I think demonstrated how important and how impactful these regional conversations really are to customers and the entire kind of electricity ecosystem in the West.
Well, I'm sure for some of the people who are involved in other regional markets, this notion of a governance issue must seem like a foreign concept to them. So, I'm joking, people, come on. But let me turn to you, Vijay, with the utility perspective. What's the utility's perspective on some of these governance issues?
Sure, yeah. So when PacificCorp decided to join the extended day-ahead market, there were no guarantees that there were going to be big governance changes. That was before the bill was passed in California. But that was okay with us. We were happy with the governance structure of the EIM and believed it fairly treated all market participants. And so we were fine kind of joining the extended day-ahead market with that governance structure in place. That being said, I mean, we know that it is a huge issue for some utilities to join the extended day-ahead market. It's really a barrier issue for them. And from our perspective, we want the largest market footprint possible. Just that increases our customers' benefits. It increases the benefits of this electricity market to all customers across the West. And so, we really view this issue as one where if there are improvements to be made, and if there is, we can create something that all utilities can get behind, then great, because it opens up a larger market footprint and any additional services in the future as well. So PacificCorp's been a huge supporter since the start. We were an early funder. We have staff that's on the various work groups as part of the pathways, kind of working on different aspects of the regional organization. I'm actually on one working on how market policy will move through the process in the future. But yeah, hugely important for not only expanding the day-ahead market, but also for building a foundation for any future market services that we decide we can kind of combine together as utilities across the West to find future efficiencies.
So you mentioned a couple of times references to customer benefits, and I want to push on that a little bit with all of you, if I could. We're continually hearing concerns and issues around affordability. That's the theme, I think, for 2026, for sure. Can we talk a little bit more about what are some of the affordability angles and benefits associated with the rollout of this market?
Yeah,
Anyone?
Well, I'll start by echoing, I think, things that I've heard already from up here. But in terms of the market being a way of optimizing the resources we have, the resources in the transmission that we have today, and making sure that we're getting the most out of them, right? And sort of looking over that broader geography to make sure that we are, getting the benefit of diversity of resources, diversity of, time zones, resource mix, all of the above, in terms of how are we setting up the markets in an efficient way and driving towards the lowering system production cost and making sure there's not unused transmission capacity, right, when it gets to in terms of the market sort of making the most of that. So I think all of that drives towards lowering costs for customers. And Vijay, you can probably say more about how it works for your customers, but I think I probably just repeated some of the stuff you said before.
That's fine, yeah. So I mean, for us, like today, but before we've joined the extended day ahead market, right? Like when we plan for the day ahead, we're only looking at our resource mix and how we can use those and the transmission available to us to meet the load in our footprint. But in a day-ahead market, we're having this centrally cleared market, kind of look at the resources across the market footprint and the transmission across the market footprint to figure out how to meet load at the lowest system cost for everybody. So that makes its way directly back into our customer rates through like lower, just lower generation production costs and lower purchase costs. So that's kind of the way it gets directly back into our customer rate base. And really, like the day-ahead market is one of the few kind of tools that we have now to be able to lower those lower electricity rates for our customers.
Kathleen, your group's focused on trying to get access to low-cost energy for customers, and anything further to add on the affordability issue from your perspective?
I think the only thing I'll add is, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, but part of the reason that the Pathways Initiative and this governance conversation has been so important in the West is that we are, the fact that we've been kind of limited by the governance of the CAISO means that this footprint that we've built in the West, that for the EIM and the real-time market that serves 80% of the load in the West, is running the risk of fracturing, because because SPP has got a different market offering. And so, and again, we can talk about that in a second, but I think from our perspective, if we're really going to see those affordability benefits, we have to keep this footprint together or make it as big as possible. And so addressing these governance changes really does have an impact on affordability, because it's going to impact what the end state and what the footprint actually looks like in the West.
Well, let's pick up on that since you teed it up. It's a good segue. So EDAM is not the only game in town, I guess, right? So can you talk a little bit, or any of you, on what the current landscape is, and how do we get where we are? How do we get where we are today? And what do you think this is going to mean in terms of looking forward with the dynamics of other potential markets out there?
I will take this. I can speak more freely than they can on this particular issue. So in part because of the governance challenges with CAISO, there were some utilities in the West that said, we want to actually go further than just the EIM, and SPP showed up and said, well, we can deliver some alternative markets to the West. We have an independent board. We can, we're a good market operator. And so SPP developed a real-time offering, the Western Energy Imbalance Market Services Program, whatever. That the WISE, we got the WEAM and the WISE, and we love our acronyms. And so there were a handful of utilities, mostly on the eastern side of the interconnect, that joined that real-time market. And then they started conversations about developing a day-ahead market, which would be an alternative to EDAM, and they called this Markets Plus. And so, I think, and especially in the early days, having a competitor show up and be developing a alternative market offering really made both CAISO and SPP do better on the market design for the day-ahead market, and so that competition was really healthy at the beginning. It has turned a little more challenging of late, and I think it has gotten to the point where some of the positions that some of the utilities are taking come down to, like, we don't want California to be the boss of me, kind of. And so that was part of why the Pathways Initiative was to say, yeah, we want independent governance. Nobody wants California to dictate anything, even though that's not really how it works. But there's, of course, the perception is reality in many ways. But as it stands right now, there are commitments from utilities in Arizona, by BPA and PowerX up in the Pacific Northwest, and a lot of and some of the public utility districts in the Pacific Northwest, and then Public Service Company of Colorado are the entities that have committed to join Markets Plus. With the exception of PSCO in Colorado, all of the rest of those are currently market participants in the EIM. So they are presumably going to leave the EIM and shrink that footprint, and then make this I'll say it in this room. I endearingly call it the Markets Plus island chain, because if you think about these potential market participants, they're not connected. They're not adjacent. In between the BPA footprint and the Arizona utilities is California, Nevada, and Utah. So if they're going to actually move power between those two areas, which is a really nice matchup resource mix. You've got the hydro in the Pacific Northwest and the solar in the desert Southwest. They match up beautifully, but you got to run that all the way through entities that are going to be joining EDAM. So it's creating some real challenging seams issues, which, despite what anybody says, are not easy to manage or fix. So we have this potential right now for a very fragmented West. There are also some things in the works, not right now, that could change that. BPA is going to get a new administrator, and probably in the coming weeks, and that new administrator could revisit the BPA markets decision. This is not news. I was reading an article in news data this morning. They were talking about all the conversations around the new BPA administrator and the potential changes to see there. So the landscape is the landscape right now is complicated, and if we really do continue to move forward, it's going to make things, I think, less efficient, more expensive, less reliable in the West. And so there's a lot of efforts, and I think, again, the having this independent governance in place is a huge hurdle for those entities to actually want to stay and potentially join EDAM in the future.
Becky, Vijay, I don't want to preclude you from the opportunity to weigh in, but I'll leave it up to you.
I can just add on a little bit. I mean, from PacificCorp's perspective, of course, we want the largest day-ahead market. We want the largest imbalance market footprint possible, right? And so any breakup of the energy imbalance market, that's unfortunate, and it will reduce benefits for customers across the West. That being said, the utilities that have stated their interest or are planning on joining the extended day-ahead market, they're some of our biggest trading partners in the energy imbalance market today. So when we do get that mature market footprint for the day-ahead market, we will have good transmission connectivity between our different utilities and a very diverse resource mix. So we still believe that even if there's not a singular market and there is a breakup of the energy imbalance market, we will still gain those benefits from joining the day-ahead market with those that have agreed to join.
All right, well, let me bring this back around towards wires a little bit here on transmission, and maybe, Becky, this might be a good one for you to touch on, but can you talk a little bit about what the potential impacts could be of more transmission, greater transmission connectivity? How does that play into this? And rollout of the market, and maybe the potential for greater growth of the market as well.
Sure. So I think, appreciate the focus on transmission in this room. And we've touched on a number of things, right? Like Kathleen was saying, we're not explicitly talking about transmission right now with EDAM. But that being said, I think, we are going to see a lot of the benefits from the market will be from optimizing the transmission that we do have now, right? Making sure we're getting the most out of it. And then as well, with the startup of the day-ahead market across, broader swaths of the West, seeing those transparent locational prices will, I think, identify areas of opportunity for transmission, right? In terms of identifying in a very transparent and with a dollar sign attached to them, what is the cost of transmission congestion with what, with your optimal dispatch of resources. The West has a really dynamic fleet, right? There's a ton of renewables, not just in California, throughout the West. Lots of battery storage being developed, again, not just in California, throughout the West. And the transmission congestion and transmission flow patterns are super dynamic, right? Like our Market Surveillance Committee is always, talking about bringing up things like how, if you want the FTR equivalent, we call them congestion revenue rights, like thinking about what is the time period that product covers, and does the flow reverse like within that time period, right? Because you've got solar hours when your resource dispatch looks like one thing because you've got so much solar in California, the Southwest, and beyond. And then come the net peak hours where that solar recedes and you're ramping up your hydro, your thermal fleets, and imports switch to exports and vice versa. And so sort of what we're doing with the transmission system is, I think we're going to see lots of interesting patterns in terms of like how the footprint's growing, what that means for use of the transmission system, and what we're seeing for the dollar values associated with transmission congestion, and what that will potentially enable in terms of future transmission opportunities, how those will get identified, planned for, cost allocated. That's something that is not today's conversation, at least as part of EDAM. But there are conversations happening in the West about transmission planning. And Kathleen, I don't know if you want to touch on West Tech at all from.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. There's a
Maybe Vijay wants to touch on this.
Yeah, we have, because we do everything piecemeal in the West. There's a group of entities coordinated through the Western Power Pool that has been developing a 10-year and 20-year outlook for regional transmission planning. And I think the idea is, again, as we're looking down the road and we're looking at the different functions that we want to be able to add and have more coordination with, maybe at some point down the road, the ROW and West Tech could partner together and sort of build that together. But it's there's a lot of planning that happens, and then there is the actual get the poles in the ground, and I think the challenges that you identified, Becky, the cost allocation in particular, is one that has been a sort of a huge barrier. The resources are so, we just have such a huge footprint and very different political views, that addressing that cost allocation question is a really, really hard one.
Well, this is probably a good time to pause and see whether anyone out in the audience has any questions for the panel about EDAM.
Well, thanks for the discussion. Song Gang from Sergeant Lundy. Question for Kathleen and Becky. You guys just touched upon this planning aspects. I was going to ask a question on how EDAM is going to impact or change the long-term planning process that CAISO is taking, as well as other utilities that are joining EDAMs, as well as probably some interregional planning against SPP Plus. How that's going to shape up and who will be responsible for what? Is CAISO thinking about this, and how do you project this? I would say responsibility will fall.
Yeah, I think we are thinking about it. I would say I'm not sure that things have kind of settled out yet in terms of what does it mean, but definitely something we're thinking about. As you alluded to, right, the CAISO, we do a robust transmission planning process for the CAISO Classic footprint, if you will, and right, we actually just have our annual transmission plan that's going to go to our board for approval next month, I believe, and it's there's a lot in there, right? 30 some odd projects. $7 billion, I think, worth of investment, and that's really geared towards looking at the resource, planning for the resource additions that the state of California is asking for, and planning the grid so that we're able to interconnect those resources better and manage the system once we get them, right? But thinking about where are the pockets of development that the state of California, through the PUC and the CEC, I think, where are they, what are they asking for in terms of those resource additions? So that's sort of, not wearing our market operator hat, but wearing our, we are the BA operator for the ISO balancing area and the transmission service provider for that. So, but you're asking a great question in terms of how do we, are the regional markets and the furtherance of regional markets going to change that at all? And I don't know that I would. I think it's a little bit of it's a little bit of an area where I think we do have to be clear about what is our role, what are the different roles that we play as an organization, right? And even as we are, as the market operator, super excited about the regional market developments and really pleased to see the growth of markets and the interest in markets and even, the governance changes, right? We support all of that, but at the same time, we will, like CAISO Corp, if you will remain the balancing area operator for, this smaller footprint, the traditional CAISO footprint, and the transmission service provider for that. So we have to make sure we're doing a good job at that role, while at the same time we're doing a good job at this other role. But I think maybe where your question is leading me to want to answer it is maybe to, if I can get one of the other panelists to maybe talk a little bit about the RA conversations that are happening from the EDAM entity's perspective in terms of the region kind of wanting to talk about planning, right? Wanting to talk about forward planning, which from a resource adequacy perspective, I realize is about the resources, the generating resources, not necessarily the transmission wires. But I think it sort of goes in that direction of how is the, what are the opportunities for regional collaboration on these next frontiers, if you will. Because I guess to go, back to your question about the transmission planning process for California, I think, again, we got to continue to do a good job for that. And, the state is very sensitive about, or I shouldn't say very sensitive, but I think the state is mindful, the legislation was mindful of, states maintaining control over their own resource mix, right? And so, again, that transmission planning process is very much informed by what are the future resources that we're trying to bring onto the system.
Sure, yeah, and I can offer the utilities perspective. So for PacificCorp, the day-ahead market doesn't change, I guess, our transmission or resource planning directly, but certainly, it is an input, thinking about how these markets kind of impact the resources that we need for the future, and then also how we move those resources to our load. So I do think that there probably is some opportunity for our transmission and resource planning processes to kind of integrate kind of what we're seeing after we join the extended day-ahead market. Kind of what Becky was just talking about from a resource adequacy perspective, though, after we designed the extended day-ahead market with the CAISO, we were starting thinking even further, well, how can we plan for longer-term resource needs and then also kind of integrate that seamlessly with the day-ahead market? So we have been working with the other EDAM entities or those that are interested in joining the EDAM to develop a resource adequacy program that will just hopefully plug right into that day-ahead market so we can move from the longer-term, seasonal view of our resource needs directly into that day-ahead view of what our resource needs are.
So I'm going to bring it back to just one last question, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up the panel. But I wanted to look ahead a little bit, and what do you see as the potential with the rollout of this market for there to maybe be opportunities to roll out additional markets down the road, like ancillary services or anything like that. So just curious as to how you envision this in the future and affecting other areas.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the resource adequacy piece is kind of the first one. That's there, and it's interesting. I've been kind of chewing on this question of regional planning and regional services, and we've been having a lot of when we talk about for example, transmission planning across the Western region is sort of overlaid regardless of what the markets are and what the footprints are. And that's like tomorrow's problem. We'll figure out how do we do regional planning if we have two different market operators in the West. But as Becky and Vijay mentioned, there's already been an effort to, well, we have an existing Western Resource Adequacy Program, the RAP, that is actually going binding in the fall of 27. That was a program that was developed by a lot of the utilities in the West, but this last fall, several of the utilities that were going to participate in that expressed some real concerns with the design of the RA program and some of the penalties, and so said we're not going to do that. We're going to actually develop a new one. And so these are driven by some of the utilities that are joining EDAM, and and the idea is that we'll have another common RA program that utilities can participate in that will be governed by the RO and operated by the CAISO. So this is sort of the first one of these additional services that we kind of envisioned for the future of the RO. Ancillary services is certainly in the mix of conversations. I defer to you guys, but I think the idea was we want to make sure that we set up this new organization with a governance structure and infrastructure that it can evolve, that it can be very responsive to what Western stakeholders want, recognizing that we're going to have to figure out the costs, because when you create voluntary services and not everybody participates, how you got to make it cost effective. So getting back to that affordability question. But I think this new independent governance is something that opens the door to a lot more Western regional services than we've had previously.
Well, great. Becky, in your initial comments, you mentioned the word picnic, which made me think about lunch, actually. And it was a perfect segue into what will be happening next as we wrap up the meeting today. Join me in thanking the panel for this really interesting and informative discussion. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. This wraps up the program portion of our meeting. We do have lunch available, if not now, pretty soon. So please feel free to get some lunch and enjoy the rest of the day. Look forward to seeing all of you at the summer meeting, which is going to be in Philadelphia, July 8th and 9th, I believe. We'll send out notices, but coming up very soon, actually. So looking forward to seeing all of you there. And thank you very much.
Thanks.